So it looks like we've got a pretty large audience already, Amy. Let's go ahead and hop right in. And first of all, welcome to everyone. We are thrilled to have you at the COSI Science Festival tonight and a Battelle session on life as a science superhero. I'm Wes Hall, the Vice President for Philanthropy and Education at Battelle here in Columbus, and we're thrilled to be the visionary sponsor for this year's COSI Science Festival. And I'm even more excited to introduce you to one of my colleagues, a very talented Dr. Amy Heintz, who is one of the top scientists at Battelle. Amy, thanks for joining us tonight from a lab here at Battelle.
Yep, hey, thanks, it's great to be here. I really wanted to be in the actual laboratory because one of the things I think when I was a little girl, I didn't really know what a lab looked like. Sometimes you see science shows, but they're never really in a lab. So I really wanted to bring you into just one part. So you're in Building 5 at Battelle here in Columbus, Ohio.
And we love the real life experience, and we're looking forward to all the students using the chat box this evening. Please enter your questions. We'll feed those right to Amy. We've had a bit of a conversation and some really cool surprises as we kind of go through this tonight. I know Amy and I are a little bit of a small box right now. Hopefully, maybe Rob, you can help us make Amy a little bit larger if we can. But Amy, tell us about what kind of scientist you actually are. There's a lot of scientists in the world doing really great things to change the world. What do you do at Battelle?
Yeah, so there's all different kinds of scientists and engineers. And the kind of scientist I am is a chemist. And there's even different kinds of chemists. But the kind of chemist I am, I'm like a chef who cooks up new materials. So I study materials. You might wonder what is a material, and it's everything you can touch and feel that has a function. So this coat is a material, my pants, the table, this, all of its materials, our skin. And a lot of the materials around you were made by somebody who wanted them to have a certain function. So that's what I do. I solve problems to make materials have certain kinds of functions. So what's interesting is I know a lot of you probably like to make slime. Do I have some slime makers out there? I know my daughter and her friends like to make slime. So I'm in particular an expert in slime. I'm called a polymer scientist. And so I wanted to show you an example of making some things with polymers. And what's interesting about polymers, and this polymer in particular, is I first heard about it when I was in 4th grade. And there was a cartoon show where they would talk about amazing scientific wonders. And they talked about how there was this guy who made the first thermoplastic ever in 1935. That didn't mean a lot to me. But what seemed really cool is he debuted it at the World's Fair in 1935 and made nylon. I don't know if you've ever heard of nylon, but back in the olden days, women wore dresses all the time and they had to cover their legs with something. They used silk and it would get stuck on something. And so DuPont and Wallace Carruthers came up with nylon as a way to be something tougher. And they marketed it and it was a huge success at the World Fair. And then later on in World War II, they had trouble with parachutes because they didn't have enough fiber for the parachutes because they were always using things like natural fiber. And they started to run out because there was a lot of need for it. So they found out that nylon was really, really good as a material because it's strong and tough. And so now today we use nylon all over the place. You might have some clothing made of nylon. So I'm going to show you something called the nylon rope thread. And I want to show it to you because it'll show you a little bit about what it's like to be a chemist. It'll let me show a little bit of my lab. So one of the things that is really important about this lab as a real laboratory is it's a safe place to work. So I have my safety equipment. I have safety glasses. I have this Tyvek safety coat, and I have nitrile gloves. These protect me from the chemicals. But there's other things you see behind me. There's this thing we call a fume hood. Do you know what fumes are? Fumes are when the solvents kind of come up and make a smell. And that smell is bad for you sometimes. So we work with the chemicals in this fume hood. And you'll notice when I open this, it might get noisy. That's because the air is getting pulled from the lab into this vent. So I can work in here very safely. So we're going to move the camera over now so you can see a little bit about what's in my fume hood. This is an experiment. It's hard to use online, guys. Okay, so I have a few different solutions water solution within a meat. I put a dye in there so you can see it. I'm going to pour that into this beaker. It's actually safe, so no trouble here. I'm going to pour it kind of sloppy. So you guys all work with water solutions. This is just like what you might have if you were with slime, except it's got a different chemical in it. This one has something very reactive. It's called an acid chloride. Actually, it reacts with air. It's in this bottle. If I open it up, it will actually make acid from reacting with the air. So it's very reactive. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pour this on top. It's in a different solution. It's not in water. It's in something called hexane. I'm going to try to pour out this dry. It's kind of tricky. Right, now, if you were given the lab with me, you would definitely be able to see what I can see, which is that there's two layers. That hexane is not mixed with water, but there's two different molecules in there. It's like a group of kids in the bottom who are all wearing red gloves, and a group in the top who are all wearing blue gloves. And right where they meet, the red and blue gloves can get together. And they keep getting together and holding hands, and it makes this polymer. I'm going to grab it right at the interface. And now, you can see I've got a rope. And so you can use this to make a bracelet. Or whatever you like. Maybe you don't like bracelets. So look at that. And you can actually keep pulling on this and pulling on this. You could actually take a whole 30 minutes just pulling on this nylon. Look how much there is. Just keep going and going and going and going. And that's like the nylon they use for parachutes. I'm going to stop. So it's not enough, though, when you're a chemist, to do fun tricks. It's not just about fun tricks. So when you cook, when you're a chef, you have to understand how the ingredients work. So now we talked about the water. These beakers I've got with powder. It's another polymer that's a salt. I'm going to add water. What about water? Water is on the bottom. I'm going to add water to this one. Okay. Now, I'm going to add hexane to this other one. Hexane was the stuff that sits on top. Let's see. So what happens when I add hexane? See anything happening? Anything happening? No, I don't see anything happening. You know why? Because this doesn't mix with hexane. It doesn't do anything. So I wonder what happens along with the water. You think I would be showing this to you if something interesting wasn't going to happen? But it takes about 30 seconds. How long do you think it's been? Let's make 15 more. 1, 2, 3, 4. Going kind of fast. It completely gelled. So now I know about this ingredient. If I want to use this ingredient, I have to use it with water. And it does something really cool with water. I bet you can think of some uses for this. I bet you might even know where they use it. It's in diapers. That's just a little bit about what it's like to be a chef who makes materials.
Amy, you have like every trick up your sleeve. You have to be the ultimate sleepover host for your daughter and her friends. I bet you're always pulling these polymer tricks out on the table.
Almost never. Okay, that won't happen again. Okay, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your science superpower. It sounds like you know a ton of stuff about the chemicals you're mixing and have all kinds of ways to impact society and make a difference. What do you think your science superpower is?
Yeah, so I really think my superpower is being able to observe patterns and differences and things that look kind of interesting. So when I was a kid, you know what I really like to do? I really like to collect rocks. Maybe some of you guys out there like to collect rocks. You know, you're walking along the beach or maybe you're outside in the yard and you just see something that looks kind of interesting. And you don't know why it looks interesting. You don't have to know why, it just does. And so you pick it up and maybe you get it wet, and when it gets wet, it looks a little bit different. You know, so over time, you really get to start to see how those differences add up. And if you pay attention to patterns and you pay attention to the things that are new, you can actually make a discovery. So I'm going to talk about a discovery that happened. It's not my discovery, although I've had some discoveries because of this discovery. But this just looks like nothing, right? If I show this to you, if you saw it, you might not look over it again. It just looks like soot. And in fact, it's not too different than soot. It is carbon. But if you look at soot all the time, and there are people who would study soot all the time, you have different tools when you're a scientist. And one of those tools is called an electron microscope. So it's like a microscope, except you can look at higher and higher magnification. What does that mean? Imagine you had a picture on your phone and you could keep zooming in and zooming in and zooming in. If you could zoom in 500,000 times on just regular carbon, it would look like this. And it looks kind of neat, but actually nothing remarkable. So somebody whose job was to look at carbon all the time, they might not pay attention to it anymore. But then one day somebody found a little piece that looked like this. And it's actually a really interesting kind of carbon called a carbon nanotube. And after this discovery of carbon nanotubes was made, then we all can have a chance to try to figure out, how does it work? How do we make things with it? What can it do? What problems can it solve? So back to my superpower of being able to observe and understand patterns, it helps me to help make discoveries that then can make the world a better place.
Amy, we had a few questions from folks asking kind of what classes did you take to become a scientist? Did you always know you wanted to be a scientist, or did you find it out kind of as you went along?
Yeah, no, I didn't know I always wanted to be a scientist. When I was little, I liked school. I really did. I liked doing well in school, but I didn't know a lot of the jobs. So when I would do, in school, sometimes they want you to say what kind of job you want. I thought maybe I wanted to be a writer, or I thought maybe I'd like to be a judge. Or later on, I really wanted to be a doctor. So it wasn't until I went to college and I thought I wanted to be a doctor that I took a chemistry class. And I'm going to show you what made me first excited about chemistry. You go to, and just to let you guys know, I'm on the Michigan chemistry team.
Well, there went the viewership, Amy.
Yeah. So I'm a big Buckeye fan, but Michigan chemistry all the way. What they give you when you go to chemistry class, they give you a box and a drawer. And in that box is a whole bunch of glassware. Look at this box of glassware. I don't know why, I just thought that was so cool. And they teach you how to use all of it. So I'm going to show you like an example. So this is a really cool flask that we use for doing things that are reactive with air. I showed you how that one chemical could react with air. You can put chemicals in here and put it all under vacuum. Use this tube to suck up the air, and then you just close it off. And they have all different kinds of things like that to prevent air. So I just thought that was really cool. So then what kind of chemistry classes did I take? I did everything I could to be in the lab and to learn how to use my skills. And I just found over the years that there's nothing that doesn't help you to learn. So you got to follow what you're interested in. Over time, I wish I had learned more thermodynamics. That's a class the mechanical engineers often take. And over time, I wish I had learned more electrical engineering. But I've learned those now in my job. So you never stop learning.
You never stop learning. And all of us at Battelle really believe that science is for everyone. And we want everyone to be able to see those connections and have some great STEM experiences in their K-12 experience to kind of think about their future careers. Someone just asked, how long did it take you in school to become a scientist?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. So remember I said there's all different kinds of scientists. So you can be a scientist, really even if you go to school, you go to high school, graduate with your high school degree, you can do some science jobs really with 2 years of school. I'm a research leader, so I lead the research projects. So I get to decide what kinds of things I want to pursue. And you have to go to school a bit longer for that. So I went to school I went to college, and then I went to graduate school, and I stayed in graduate school for 6 years. So I went to school for a long time, but it stops being like school. So when you're in what's called graduate school, you aren't spending as much time in the classroom. You're spending time practicing your skills. So I was learning how to make liquid crystalline polymers using those air-free techniques I talked about. I was learning how to understand how molecules vibrate, and I was doing a lot of work with lasers and trying to put lasers on materials. So it ends up being very, very different.
So Amy, tonight we see you in the corner of your lab. What does the normal day for you look like at Battelle? And what I really want to know is how many times a day are you making slime downstairs and we just don't know it yet?
Yeah, well, I make slime a little less, but I'll tell you about a normal day when I was earlier in my career and then a normal day now, because I think they're both important. Earlier in my career, a lot of times when you set up a reaction like I showed you, it's not as fast. So you have something you're trying to prove. You have some hypothesis and you want to figure something out and you set up a reaction. Maybe I think I can make a new lightweight material by mixing these two things. That reaction could take 24 hours. So a lot of times the first thing you do when you come in the lab is you look at your reaction and you see what happened. And you might have to take some special steps with one of my other trusty pieces of equipment. You might have to separate out your material. And so the first part of your day would be maybe looking at what you made and then setting up your next reaction. So that's one. If you're not doing lab work, something that we spend a lot of our time doing is trying to figure out how to solve problems. So let me tell you one of the problems we're working on right now. We're trying to figure out, how do I break down plastic faster? So I talked about how great plastic is, but maybe we don't want so much plastic in the landfill. Maybe there's something we could do in our home. If we have a little box, we can figure out how to put that plastic in it and have it come out and be, I don't know, food or something good. So we're actually working on that problem. We're actually working on a way to break plastic down faster and figure out how to build it up into something useful. So for that, we get together, we have brainstorming. I have to read what other people have done. So I spend a lot of time in my day learning. I spend some of my day writing, thinking about ideas, and then talking about those ideas with other people and seeing, does that make sense? And then I'd say another part of my day is helping others. So when we're solving problems, we're helping others, but I also help other scientists. So maybe they've done a reaction and they have a question. They don't maybe understand why something happened. And I come in and I look at their results. Maybe they've got, I don't have it here. Well, I'll show you. They might have a piece of data they don't understand, and I would help them to maybe understand it a little better, maybe suggest an experiment they could do.
That's great. It sounds like all the classes that you took in middle school and in high school, whether it's English and literature, being able to write and explain yourselves and work well with others, actually play into your day job now at Battelle.
Yeah, I would like to comment on that just a little bit more, that there's a science job for everybody, really. I mean, if you like to draw, there's a science job for you. It can be a very creative job. It can also be a job for somebody who really likes facts or who really likes numbers. Now to understand patterns, sometimes we use very complex math. We have to use computers. So people who like to program, that's a science job. So there's something for everybody. It's really just a thought process to help us solve problems better.
And a few minutes ago, Amy, you showed us, I think, a picture of carbon nanotubes. Someone's asked, how is that used in science, perhaps to help other people? And then thinking about how Battelle lives on the cutting edge of science and innovation, thinking a bit more about nanotechnology, could you create a material that could clean itself? And if that's even possible, I have no doubt it would be here at Battelle. But what do you think about nanotechnology as far as carbon nanotubes and then technology that's able to clean itself?
Yeah, so all of the technology to clean itself, there are things that can clean itself. And if you ask me this question, maybe you've heard of the lotus leaf, which is something that is in nature, that when water hits it, it doesn't wet the surface, it bounces right off. And that bouncing action, every time the water picks up dirt and kind of cleans that lotus leaf. So scientists are trying to figure out how to make that kind of surface, and we've done it for some examples. But sometimes some things are really difficult because to make those work, you have to make the surface a very certain way, and it has to stay that way. And sometimes that's not rugged. So what will happen is if you want to have, I don't know, your floor, your bathroom floor clean itself. It might last for a little while, but scientists are still working on how to make that rugged. As for the carbon nanotubes, one of the things we've been doing, it takes a long time for that discovery to really make its way to help. But for example, I'm trying to think about how to explain this. Carbon is like a metal, except it's really, really lightweight. So all the things that you do right now with metals, like pass electricity or cool things, we're looking to do with carbon nanotubes. And if we could do that, it would make vehicles lighter. It would make airplanes lighter. It's really an amazing material. It's stronger. A single molecule is stronger than steel. But we haven't quite figured out how to make them all together the right way. So it just takes a lot of time. Right now, carbon nanotubes are used in some applications. They're used in batteries. They're used, we're making heaters from them for de-icing aircraft. But the true promise is still taking a little bit of time.
That's a great answer, and I have no doubt that you can answer any question that people ask you. Do scientists just know everything there is to know about society? Like, do you know how much the moon weighs, Amy? Like, what do you not know?
Yeah, no, I don't know a lot. And I think it's really important to not be afraid to say, I don't know. When I was little, I thought if you wanted to be a scientist, you had to know everything. But that's not true. What you have to know as a scientist is how to learn, how to figure things out, how to ask the questions and set up an experiment so you can figure out the answer. So now, if somebody asks me what the weight of the moon is, I don't need to know because I know where to look for the answer, and probably you guys do online too. You just look it up. So there's all kinds of things that I know or things that I forget, and that's okay. You don't have to know everything to be a scientist.
I love that answer, and thinking a bit more about there's no possible way to know everything, but a question from one of our younger listeners or viewers tonight, Penelope, who is in first grade, asked, what do you love most about science? It feels like science is all around all of us. So what's your favorite part of science?
Yeah, my favorite part of science is really asking questions that I don't know the answer to and trying to figure it out. I love to try to solve problems. And so how do you make a vehicle go a mile per second? Could you make a vehicle go a mile per second? Maybe. What would you need to do? So it's a thought process that you can start asking yourself. You can ask yourself a simple question like, why are grapes brown when a grape is green? Not grapes, raisins. Why are raisins brown? Why are raisins brown when the grapes are green? And you don't have to know the answer to that question, but you can set up an experiment to study it. And so that's what I love about science, is that it helps you to understand all the world around you in such a more fun way.
That's great. There's so much to learn. Continuous learning is what life is all about for all of us. Just a reminder for folks, we have about 6 more minutes. We'd love to take more of your questions in the chat. Someone just asked, Amy, what are you studying right now as you're trying to continue to learn and grow?
Yeah, what I'm studying right now, I'm studying really hard how to cool things down faster, because I really do want to make a vehicle that can go a mile per second. And to make a vehicle go a mile per second, it starts to heat up so much in the air that it melts most of the materials we know. And so we got to figure out how to cool it down. So I'm thinking really hard about how to cool things down. The other thing I'm thinking a lot about is how to capture carbon dioxide out of the air. A lot of people are working on that problem. I'm thinking a lot about that. So there's so many areas I'm working on, but those are 2 that I'm spending a lot of time on right now.
Amy, as you've explored science as a scientist, what other, let's say your colleagues or peers, what other types of scientists really catch your eye all the time when you think that is some really cool work that those kinds of folks are doing? Another area of science.
Well, that is an impossible question to answer because I really am impressed by anybody who's got skills I don't have. I just think that's really neat. My husband is a mechanical engineer, and I think that is a really cool field to be able to understand how things work in a way that I'm not as good at. I think physicists are very interesting, the way they can think through a problem and how it really fundamentally works. I think mathematicians who can see patterns and relationships that I can't see. In biology, now biology is really a burgeoning science discipline because we're starting to learn how to make things with biology. So that's turning into a really cool field.
That's great. And in school, we talk a lot about reduce, reuse, recycle, and being good stewards of our environment and conservation. Gloria in second grade asked if there's any reusable things that you use in your own science lab or in science in general that kind of relates to the reduce, reuse, recycle slogan.
Yeah, I mean, we reuse quite a lot. So you'll notice that all the glassware that I use is glassware so that we can clean it. It stays fresh, we reuse it. Some things we can't reuse because they've been reacted with chemicals. But we do, just like at home, just like you use dishes, you don't use, paper plates all the time. We try to use things that we can reuse over and over again, and that is important. And then, finding new uses, that's what I wanted to tell you about the project we're working on to figure out how to break down plastic and make it into something new, because there's a lot of opportunity there.
So we've talked a little bit, Amy, about the broad opportunity that science presents for all of us and for the benefit that you can have in society if you're a scientist. What advice would you have for those viewing that may be budding scientists that have an interest but aren't quite sure if science is for them or what path to go on to explore it a bit more?
Yeah, well, I would say don't be afraid to make a mess and don't be afraid to make a mistake. So if you see something on TikTok, my daughter all the time will see something and she doesn't just think it's cool, she'll try it. We tried to make tanghulu, it was okay. We made she made Rice Krispie treats, she got permission, but she figured out how to make them. So you can do a lot with cooking and what you have around you. You can do projects and crafts. You can help collect, sort of a collection and look at things in different ways, weigh them. So just, whatever you're interested in, just don't be afraid to get your hands, into it and figure it out.
So Amy, I'm going to wrap up with another question from the chat, and someone asked, what's the coolest tool that you use in your lab? Might be a bit of a scavenger hunt there behind you, but then I also want you to tell us, what is the rectangle of glass there behind you that's in the background?
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, I forgot. Let me answer the first question. The coolest thing that most people would think is this electron microscope, because you can look at something so close up. But I really, really like spectroscopy, which is studying how things interact with light. So there's one of those in here, it's called a Raman spectrometer. If you shine a laser on something and then you watch, you'll find out that everything around you is moving. Everything is vibrating. And you wouldn't believe it, but it all vibrates with a signature, and you can identify things based on that signature. It's really, really cool. So if you give me an unknown thing, I can put it in my Raman spectrometer, and I can figure out what it is. I think that's cool. This is bulletproof glass. It doesn't really prevent, see what it's made up of layers. I forgot to tell you guys that these layers are made of a polymer. So when the bullet hits, it gets dissipated by that first layer. It keeps going through. And then here's what it looks like when it's been hit. It's super heavy because it's so many layers to stop the bullet. Look at this. So you can see where the bullet hit, and then see, I don't know if you can tell, it kind of breaks in those layers. And so the way, it's not really bulletproof, it breaks, but it keeps the bullet from getting through to the other side.
How heavy is that?
That weighs about 20 pounds. I'm just really weak. Too much time in the lab.
You made that look easy. Well, we're right at time tonight. Amy, thank you so much for the time that you've given us and all the explanations and the access behind the scenes of a lab at Battelle. We truly couldn't be prouder of the work that you and all the scientists at Battelle do. And for everyone out there, we want you to know that science is for you. Please take the time to explore your passions and stay curious. And from all of us at Battelle, we hope you have a great COSI Science Festival.
Hi guys, thanks for joining in.